I wanted to see what I could make in a month and then get my friends to play it. They ended up really liking it, so I decided I would start making a devlog series about it, although I've been developing this game for closer to 2 months now since getting them to play it. First I'll explain what the game is that I'm actually making, and then I'll show off everything I've made in the past 2 months. So here's the plan. Basically you customize your robots from a variety of parts, the heads, legs and arms, and then you make them fight to the death. You'll level up as you fight and go against harder enemies and even bosses, which is pretty much the basic concept for the game. Here's what the earliest version of the player looked like. I used this as a reference to get an idea for how I would model the different parts for it. When I made the legs, although they look cool, I'm not sure why I made them like this originally, knowing that I wouldn't be able to animate them, because I'm not good at animating and it's also very time consuming. So what I decided to do instead is to make all the parts in the leg slots wheels and added a dust effect around them, so that way I could get away with not having to animate it. Everything else, like weapon attacks, are animated with a basic timeline node, so they just rotate a certain degree or move forward and back. The actual character controls like a tank, with the head and legs being separate. So your head will rotate wherever you look, and the legs can only move forwards or backwards. With customizing the character, I've made a few parts just to test it out, and to make sure that everything saves and loads properly as well. When making the UI for the game, I start out with the functionality, and use basic colours to help get a feel for the theme of it. After all of this was set up, I could start creating artwork for it in Photoshop. At this point I thought it was long overdue to make something that the player could actually fight. So I started with a simple AI that only moves towards you and then attacks you with the same attacks that you have. When he gets into the proximity of the player, his attacks get triggered after a random delay, so the delay could take up to a maximum of 2 seconds for the easier enemies in the game, and that delay will get shorter and shorter when the enemies get harder. I'm not sure if this is the best attack system, but it feels okay for now. I also added a stun feature to the game, where one hit will knock the enemy back slightly, the second will do the same, but the third attack on an enemy will knock it back much further, and then it will go on cooldown, so you can't just keep the enemy stun locked for the whole match. The combat still feels pretty basic, and I have more features planned to vary it up a bit, with things like special attacks that can be used after you take so much damage, but I still need to think how complex or simple the fighting will actually be in this game. I also didn't like how the AI always just beelines for you, so I made it that after a random few seconds, it can choose to move to a random spot on the map. It also does this after landing a stun on the player, so the AI feels a little bit smarter, like it's actually trying to avoid the player. If you beat an enemy you get XP and level up, and this is how you can unlock more robot parts, materials and different enemies to fight. I also want there to be a variety of stages in the game, with each one being unique from one another. Some stages have events that will happen in them, such as a train coming through this map at certain time intervals and will kill you if you're in its tracks. I think this will be good because it keeps the gameplay a bit more dynamic. There's still a lot of things that I need to fix for the game, and a lot of things that I still need to work out, like making the timeline speeds tied to the weapon speeds. And I'm also still trying to come up for a name, so if anyone has any good suggestions, feel free to comment them. If I do use your suggestion, I'll make sure to credit you in the actual game. And any feedback on what I've made so far or on the devlog is appreciated as well. Some of the content that I have planned for future devlogs will be multiplayer, which I'm still trying to figure out, so that's not a promise yet. Bosses, special attacks, randomized enemies, and much more. So make sure to subscribe if you want to get notified when I upload a new devlog. Also, make sure to go follow me on Twitter, because I'm going to be posting content of the game on there as well. I'll probably try to get the next devlog up in about 2 or 3 weeks. So until then, stay tuned.